Hello, beloved. Welcome today to this message that has been on my heart for days. I'm covered in goosebumps. We're doing some real ancestral healing for my Palestinian self and my Canaanite self. and, you know, for some reason, I have been led back to the church. And if my voice is a little raspy, it's because I was singing on the top of my lungs in the church last night. Now, I was asking God, why did you lead me back to the church? Asking Spirit, why am I being led back to the church? And many messages have been coming through for me. The first is the wall of Jericho, the message of Jesus. Okay. So I looked into this. What is it that I need to bring forward and say? So I ask that this video finds those that are open to receiving this message. And if you are not open, I request that you stay. Your indignation may be as a result of years of trauma, conditioning, and just hate. 111 on my clock right now. As I was cleaning up my house before I got ready to do this video, it was said onto me that I needed to carry this message today, December 2nd, 2024. And I looked at the clock and it was 12:12. I have my computer here, so we're gonna do all these things on ChatGPT. Can be my friend, but don't trust everything. What is the significance of 12:12 spiritually? Alignment with your higher purpose, new beginnings. To maintain positive thinking and to trust the universe or divine forces. Okay? So I come to you now with a very potent message. And that is something that I've talked about, and that is escaping fear-based spirituality, escaping an idea that God plays favorites, escaping this idea that one group of people is favored. A god of war needs to be cast away because it is killing us generation after generation after generation after generation. You know, the God of the Old Testament, I believe, was not a loving God, and I believe that as much as us as humans are open to divine forces, we are also open to harmful spirits, harmful entities that dress themselves up as something good, as something loving, or as something necessary. And I bring to you forward the wall of Jericho, the story of Jericho. Because supposedly to the Israelites, right, they were promised the land of Canaan. Now, who promised them? According to them, it was God. According to my ancestors, we might have a different story for you. I'm going to just read for you directly from the Bible. I'm not going to give you opinions. I'm just going to read directly from the book of Joshua. This is a New International Version, Joshua 6. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. trying to take what is not theirs. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in." So Joshua son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." This is very difficult for me to read. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priest who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, "Do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout, then shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. Before I continue, I would just like to say this. This is just absolutely ridiculous. If you are one of the Christian tradition or one of the Abrahamic tradition and you stand by this story and you think that this is a story of victory, this is a story of witchcraft. This is a story of serving an entity that wishes destruction and death on one. This is not a story of success. This is not a story of Jesus' love and mercy. This is a story of some really deeply ingrained superiority coupled with natures of witchcraft. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. And the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord, and must go into his treasury." Saying thievery, saying walking into a city that is already occupied, walking into a place that is already accounted for, when there is so much land all the way around and you have survived thus far. You somehow have been commanded by this entity to take the riches, to take the city, because you are favored and promised at the expense of other people's lives. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed, so everyone charged straight in. And they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Wrathful, evil. This is an act of evil. So when God says to you in the tradition to not use his name in vain, it is not saying, oh my God, so that you can change it to, oh goodness, or oh my gosh. It is saying things such as, God promised me this land, and God told me that I have to commit this act of witchcraft, and once I have finished, I will be able to enter your city, kill you all, and take it in a act of greed for myself. But that's what God said. No, that is using God's name in vain. It's saying that God favored you over anybody else. That God promised you land in an already occupied territory. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with your oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. Thieves. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. At that time Joshua pronounced a solemn oath, cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest he will set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. God, speak through me, please. This is a story of debauchery. If this land was so promised as it was, why did they lose so far? Why did they lose so many times? Why did the kingdom of Israel not last for merely seconds? Because you are working with forces of evil. You are practicing states of ego, of harm, of destruction, of nastiness. You think that the answer to your suffering is to somehow come on top and be the one that inflicts harm rather than the one that experiences it. And that is evil. You speak badly on people who build a wall to protect themselves, because here come these people blaring horns with trumpets and an ark and walking around the city and shouting, because they claim that what is yours is theirs. You have practiced witchcraft in the name of God, and if you fall behind this story, treating people as your enemy, treating life as a battle, and consistently going to battle for the desires of your heart, or should I say the desires of your ego, the desires of your sin, you will fail. It may even look pretty at first, because that's how the nasty forces of this world looks. You think that the enemy, the devil, these evil entities are going to come to you and you will be able to discern what is evil. You'll say something is not right sometimes. But a lot of times it will present itself to you in places of worship, in your childhood, the ways of your childhood. It will present itself pretty, comfortable. Sometimes the discomfort that you are feeling is not evil. It's not the work of the enemy. The discomfort is brought onto you by these evil forces, these disgusting forces, these horrible narratives that have sunk their claws into your spirit and your everyday life. And they are challenging you to change them. And you are uncomfortable because you are looking change in the face and you are realizing that the conditioning of your childhood, the conditioning of your life, the conditioning of the church, the conditioning of the Abrahamic tradition is evil. Is evil. So when the 10 Commandments come later, it says, you shall not murder. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. What does that mean? That means that you should not consume your ideas and thoughts to be aligned with Spirit's good intentions all the time. For there is evil that walks, there is sin that walks, there is harm that walks this earth. And it doesn't always look that way. Misusing the name your God is saying, God favors me over you. God promised me your belongings. So now I will kill you because God promised me. I am promised. I am favored. I am anointed. At the expense of you. No, Jesus said love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? So if you are stuck in this mindset, if you are festering in this mindset, you are carrying patterns of harm, trauma, war, and evil. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. It is important to know that we are dealing with human beings. I, Samir El-Rawi, can be wrong. I'm just going to look up what was Jesus' main message on ChatGPT. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Selflessness, humility, Radical love for enemies. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:54. In conclusion, Jesus' main message was the proclamation of God's love and the coming of his kingdom, and the invitation to enter this kingdom through repentance, faith, and love. It was on a radical command to love God and love others. So I ask you now, when you sit on a pulpit of superiority, ask yourself, am I like the Pharisees that committed death against a light worker, Jesus? Or am I like Jesus? Who was this man? This man was somebody that hung around with the sick, hung around with the poor, hung around with the rejects of society. Said that there is nobody that is above one another. We are not better than one another. We are not to kill one another. We are not to live in this mindset of us versus them. We are to love. So what are you doing today to do so? I don't believe he was the Son of God. I believe that he was a light worker sent by God to revise the disgusting nature of religious superiority that was taking over the world and continues to take over the world today. What are you doing today to love? And what are you doing today that is inflicting harm upon others in the name of your spirituality? You think walking around the walls of Jericho 7 times for 7 days is not witchcraft? Is not ritualistic? You know, it's the pot calling the kettle black. Every accusation is a confession. When somebody comes forward from me from the church, from the mosque, from the temple, from any type of religious tradition, and tells me that I am of sin and I am wrong and they must eradicate me, I'm sorry. That is of the devil. Alright, I think that's the message I have to say today. There's a lot of fear letting out this message. A lot of fear. But I am willing to step into that fear and say it anyway. Be well, be love. Bye.